In Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, there are only 2 available fire types. Whoever made that decision should be fired. No, but seriously, would it be possible to beat a hardcore Nuzlocke where any Pokemon that faints is boxed forever using only these 2? Luckily, we can get our first half of the team right away as we, because of Barry's great influence, steal it. Chimchar's a lot of people's favorite starter of all time, and for good reason. I'm more of a Piplup guy myself, since Chimchar kinda looks like he's lighting a fart on fire at all times. While our little guy has a neutral hardy nature, which is pretty good for Chimchar, despite his good endurance and healthy appetite, he's got terrible IVs. So I reset the game 13 times. And while our new Chimchar did get pretty decent IVs, I reset for a completely different reason I think is going to be a lot more important. We also got a hasty nature, and while that means less defense, I think the speed bonus we get is going to be worth the trade-off. On top of that, Chimchar has an innate quality that means this run can get off the ground at all, which is that it evolves at level 14, the level cap for the first gym. Without Monferno, and I can't believe I'm about to say these words, Rourke would be completely impossible. Rourke, like so many other first gym leaders, has a team full of rock types. It's very original. And we'd be completely screwed if Chimchar didn't, upon evolution, acquire the fighting type. This means rock moves only do neutral damage instead of super effective, and we get a super effective stab move in Mach Punch. So when Geodude hits Zuko with a rock throw, he only takes about 1/4 of his health. It's still a lot of damage, but at least the next turn we can finish off the Geodude with another Mach Punch. Rourke's second Pokemon is an Onix, which has great defense, but its offensive power is terrible, so after I hit it with a Mach Punch, not even doing half, it lowers my defense with Screech. This is rough, since our defense is already nerfed because of our nature. I don't really have a choice but to keep throwing Mach Punches, as the Onix further lowers my defense with another Screech. And though Rourke heals up the next turn, at -4, any attack, even from an Onix, would take Zuko out. After the potion, 2 Mach Punches aren't even enough to take Onix out, and he tries to just Screech me again, but ends up missing, allowing me to take him out the next turn with another Mach Punch. And while that means we've taken care of Onix, there's no way I can one-shot this Cranidos, and any one hit will take Zuko out. So unfortunately, after I almost take out the Cranidos with a Mach Punch, it goes for Leer? Excuse me, what? Listen, you're not gonna see me complaining that I don't have to do 20 or so more resets, but this is embarrassing. I went and lost to a trainer that didn't have a single gym badge. Yeah, it's embarrassing because you could have won so easily. These miscreants are babbling utter nonsense I just can't stomach. Show them some manners, if you will. We're approaching you strictly as businessmen. Fine, I'll show you business. Monkey business. With so few Pokemon, it's going to be incredibly important to stay under the level cap, so we're going to have to skip as many trainers as possible. Some fights, however, are unskippable, like for instance the boss fight versus Mars. But unlike her counterpart Jupiter, she's not particularly threatening, since we can just drop a Rock Tomb on Zubat, taking it out in one hit, and then just use super effective Mach Punches to take out the Purugly before it can do any meaningful damage to us. From there, we've got to continue our stealth mission of avoiding as many trainers as possible, since the 3rd and 4th gym leader have the same exact level cap, meaning we'll have to fight one of them severely underleveled. But first, now that we've reached Eterna City and get access to Route 211, we can actually find our second and final encounter, Ponyta. In terms of stats, it's a pretty average Ponyta, but having a second Pokemon to distribute experience to is going to be invaluable. We of course have to take on the gym in Eterna City, but because it's a grass-type gym, I go in as underleveled as possible and just take out the opposition with 3 Flame Wheels. Yeah, that one's not exactly rocket science. No, the real challenge in Eterna City is taking on Galactic Commander Jupiter, a difficult trainer to take on and potential run killer in any Sinnoh run, never mind just using fire types. Just like her colleague Mars, she starts out with a Zubat that we can instantly knock out by just dropping another Rock Tomb, which of course leaves her with her infamous Skuntank. This thing's got the high critical hit ratio Night Slash, and luckily, fighting resists Dark. We also outspeed the Skuntank, doing about 35% with a Flame Wheel, after which Night Slash luckily doesn't get a crit. I fire off another Flame Wheel, which activates Skuntank's Citrus Berry, getting it back above half health. And instead of Night Slash, this time Skuntank hits me with a Smoke Screen. I luckily don't miss right afterwards, taking it down into the red with another Flame Wheel. And Night Slash once again, thankfully doesn't get a crit. I then of course do miss a Flame Wheel, and my worst nightmare is starting to come true. Skuntank then hits me with another Smoke Screen, further reducing my chances of ever hitting a move again. I very fortunately don't fall into that trap, since losing the run to evasion tactics would feel incredibly bad. Now that we're allowed to leave Eterna City, we've got to continue dodging trainers, this time on Cycling Road, which can take a little bit of doing. Oh, and you might notice I have a 3rd Pokemon, which is just Bidoof for HMs, but if I ever send it out of its Pokeball during a battle, I also lose the run. And once we skip this particular trainer, we reach the Berry Master's house, where we theoretically get access to most berries in the game. The rest are either available to collect in the world or in Pastoria City once we get there. But first, we have to actually make it there, and there are a few obstacles in the way. For example, Barry once we try to leave Heart home. Because this Pokemon game was made before they decided to make rivals a complete joke by giving them the Pokemon that's weak to your starter, Barry actually poses a threat to us. The only real issue on his team is of course his Prinplup, since his Starly, after quick attacking Monferno, just gets destroyed by a Rock Tomb. He of course sends in Prinplup next, so we'll have to show him one of our secret weapons, Grass Knot, that we picked up from beating Gardenia. However, it doesn't actually do that much damage since Prinplup isn't too chunky a boy. However, that's not too big a deal, since a secret big Prinplup doesn't want you to know is that at level 21, Prinplup doesn't actually have a water move in Diamond and Pearl. So despite getting a critical hit with my second Grass Knot, this fight was never particularly threatening. And because Empoleon becomes weak to fighting, Barry's not one of the many things I'm very afraid of in this game. I'm for instance terrified by the mandatory 2 trainers we have to fight before reaching Veilstone. Okay, one of the 2, Ace Trainer Maya, really isn't that big a threat, but it's really important we take her on first so that we don't trigger the double battle, which would just be fatal. Ace Trainer Dennis, on the other hand, requires our secret weapon, which I completely forgot to teach to Monferno. And this little maneuver cost me the entire run. You see, not only does Dennis have a Monferno of his own, he also has a Gyarados in the back. My grand plan and the reason I reset 13 times to get the right Chimchar was to specifically get Hidden Power Electric. Not only could it be insanely useful versus Wake's water types, but it also enables us to get past this impassable Gyarados. After Intimidate, Rock Tomb does a pitiful amount despite being super effective, but the Gyarados just decides to go for Bite. As soon as this thing goes for Thrash, the fight will be over, and at this point, I'm even out of Rock Tombs, so I'm forced to just fire off a Flame Wheel. And in the rain, I do pathetic damage. And get a burn? After realizing I didn't have hidden power, I knew I was going to lose, but with this burn, everything changes and I somehow have a chance again. It doesn't fix the fact that I don't have any good moves to choose from, so I just have to hit it with a Grass Knot, which does a surprising amount, and I'm able to survive a second Thrash on just 6 HP. We do still have Ponyta at full HP, so I swap in against a Thrash as the Gyarados gets incredibly low from the burn, which means that somehow, despite making the most costly mistake I've ever made in my Pokemon career, we get through this fight. So you best believe I'm going to be checking my movesets before every fight in the game from here on out. Once we reach Veilstone, we get access to a lot of TMs from both the department store and the game corner. But the main attraction is of course taking on the 3rd gym leader Maylene, who we have to take on severely underleveled if we even want to make it to Pastoria City and make it through all the gym trainers there as well. This will be Iroh's debut fight, who immediately steps on the Meditite to hopefully get a flinch, but it sets up its attack with a Meditate instead. I then go for a Fire Blast, which is more than enough to take out the Meditite's remaining health. In comes Maylene's second Pokemon, Machoke, which is a bit scarier. I managed to connect with a Fire Blast again, almost taking the Machoke all the way down into the red as it retaliates with a Brick Break, doing a lot of damage and triggering my Citrus Berry. Maylene then wastes her Hyper Potion as I hit another Fire Blast to take the Machoke back down. I then use Stomp for the better accuracy to take out Machoke's remaining health, leaving only Lucario. And here's the thing, Lucario could take me out with a Bone Rush, but because it's a multi-hit move, it only sees the first hit and goes for a random move since that first hit can't take me out, and ends up getting a critical hit Metal Claw. I then managed to connect with a Fire Blast and really hoping this would KO, I just fall short. However, I once again managed to get a burn, which also falls short of getting the KO because of her Citrus Berry. I am still in range of being taken out by anything here though, so I need to swap out, sending in Monferno, who's only at level 24. And though I wouldn't have been taken out, the Lucario just ends up missing the Bone Rush, falling the next turn to my Mach Punch before it can get taken out by Burn. And while that means we managed to beat the 3rd gym leader, I am not psyched for what's to come. Particularly, I'm incredibly afraid of Crasher Wake. The guy's got a team full of scary water types, and even with access to Hidden Power Electric, we need a good plan. So with Monferno being at level 24, I head back to Route 201 and 204 to fight Starlies and Budews, collecting as many Speed EVs from Starlies as I need to outspeed Floatzel, and putting all the experience I can until I almost reach level 31 towards special attack EVs from Budew. And so, the time has come to take on Crasher Wake. The fact that he leads with a Gyarados is incredible incredibly scary and means we're basically locked out of physical moves at all because of Intimidate. So if Hidden Power was a physical move, we'd be SOL. Lucky for us though, Hidden Power is a special move, and with the quad effective damage from Hidden Power Electric and all those special attack EVs, it's actually enough to just take out Gyarados in one shot. Second out is Wake's Quagsire, definitely his least threatening Pokemon since a single quad effective Grass Knot is enough to take it out. Finally, he's left with Floatzel, and because we've taken out his other two Pokemon in one hit and we're at full health, we're able to take a brine from this thing. And with the EVs we invested into speed, we're faster and can hit a Hidden Power first to take out over half of its health, also activating its Citrus Berry. Then instead of maximizing damage with brine, Floatzel goes for Pursuit. If he would have clicked brine, that would at least threaten to end the run since a critical hit would just have taken out Zuko. But as soon as I saw that resisted Pursuit, I knew that a Hidden Power the next turn would take out the Floatzel and claim us the 4th gym badge. With Wake out of the way, we need to head to Celestic Town to pick up Surf. Monferno, do the thing. We then pick up Surf from Cynthia's grandma, and because this isn't Platinum, we don't even have to fight Cyrus. Then, since the level cap is 36, Ponyta is still gonna have to wait, but Monferno can finally take on its final form, Infernape, which happens just in time for us to take on the 5th gym leader, Fantina. Our fighting type is not particularly useful here since she runs a team full of ghost types. However, we're still gonna be getting value out of Hidden Power since she starts out the fight with a Drifblim. It does about 66%, a lot more than I expected, as the Drifblim just goes from minimize, setting up its evasion. Zuko, however, decides to be reliable and just knocks out the Drifblim the next turn with a Hidden Power. Next is Miss Magus, by far the most lethal Pokemon on our team, and luckily it doesn't have Stab and can't see a KO with Psybeam. Knowing it's a lot weaker on the defensive side than specially defensive, I go for a Flame Wheel, doing over half. Heck, I even get another burn and activate Miss Magus' Citrus Berry. Though a non-crit wouldn't KO, a Psybeam would be incredibly problematic, so I'm very relieved when it goes for Confuse Ray, since it's what Zuko's best equipped to handle with a held Lumberry to get rid of the confusion. From there, another Flame Wheel is enough to take out the Miss Magus, leaving Fantina with just her final Pokemon Gengar, and Zuko is still at full health. I once again go for Flame Wheel since it's by far my best damaging move, as the Gengar just hits me with a Shadow Claw. I know it's supposed to be Fantina's signature move, but she really doesn't have any Pokemon to take advantage of its physical capabilities, not even in Platinum. With access to Surf, I can go pick up Flamethrower from Fuego Ironworks, which I also can just get from the Game Corner. I then head west to Canalave, where we once again have to take on Barry, but with our new Infernape and Hidden Power Electric, he poses no threat at all. Unlike Platinum, we have no mandatory business at Iron Island, so I can immediately just go and challenge Byron, who unlike in Platinum has a Bronzor instead of Bronzong, which of course just gets immediately torched by a Flamethrower. His second Pokemon is his Ace Bastiodon, a defensive powerhouse capable of taking incredible. It's also quad weak to fighting and gets demolished by a close combat. Finally, he's got a Steelix, which as you would expect also just gets one shot by a Flamethrower. Feels strange to not have to prepare more for a gym. With the 6 badge collected, we receive a quest to take down Team Galactic. But before we do any of that, I go and pick up Strength. This allows me to go to Wayward Cave, which in Diamond and Pearl, unlike Platinum, is blocked by Strength. Exactly like Platinum, however, we can pick up the TM for Earthquake, which I don't even end up needing to take care of Saturn. I head back to Lake Verity to help out the Professor and Dawn and take out Mars once again, so they send me north. But before we can reach Snow Point City, there are a lot more trainers we can dodge, and okay, look, I can't dodge them all. You try to dodge all the it's hard! And since Candace's level cap is at 42, we can finally let Ponyta evolve into Rapidash, making it time to take on the 7th gym leader, Candace, who, much like Byron, is weak to our fire typing. And because she sends in Snowburst that can't hurt me whatsoever, I make sure to set up a Swords Dance to boost my attack, as it just uses Ingrain. From there, we just destroy the Snover the next turn with a quad-effective Flamethrower, and Candace thought that was so fun, she sends in her Abomasnow, which, as you can probably figure out, suffers the exact same fate. Now, despite Candace being the 7th gym leader, you'd think she'd have some better Pokemon, but she just sends in an unevolved Sneasel, which also gets destroyed by a Flamethrower, leaving her only with Medicham, which is the entire reason we set up that Swords Dance in the first place, to allow us to take it out in one shot with an Aerial Ace, swiftly claiming our 7th gym badge. This means we can continue the Team Galactic storyline, and lucky for us, this idiot drops his key, otherwise we'd kinda just be stuck, and Cyrus would just destroy the universe, I guess. This dummy's a lot more important in the Sinnoh storyline than I realized. Before the incredibly scary boss fights at Mount Coronet, we have to take on Cyrus in the headquarters. This particular fight is made a lot less scary by the fact that none of his Pokemon are fully evolved. So it's pretty much a freebie, just like this Master Ball. What exactly do you think I'm gonna do with this? Cyrus then summons Palkia, and if he succeeds in destroying the galaxy, I guess we can't continue the run, so we're gonna have to try and stop him. Now, there are two big problems with this Cyrus fight. First off, it's one of the most difficult fights in the run where we have terrible matchups and could easily just lose us the game. The other problem is we face Cyrus immediately after this multi-battle, meaning we don't get to change our team. So we need to play this very smart and very strategic to put us in the best possible spot once we actually take on Cyrus. Jupiter and Mars themselves aren't total pushovers, but they start out with 2 Bronzors, and we can torch the first one with a flamethrower from Iroh. From here, the strategy's pretty simple. If I try to take on 2 really strong Pokemon at a time, that's gonna be a lot tougher than if I just leave the Bronzor alive and start taking care of Mars's Pokemon first. Once Mars only has Golbat left, I try to flinch it with a Stomp, but unfortunately I get poisoned by a Poison Fang instead. This isn't the end of the world, since we do get healed before we take on Cyrus, but it does mean we have to send in Zuko a little bit earlier than planned. Once I've taken out Mars's Golbat, and thus all of her Pokemon, I take out the Bronzor with a flamethrower. In comes Golbat, which hits us with an Air Cutter, which luckily crits Munchlax and not me. Finally, Skuntank comes in, and after I get a good amount of damage on it with flamethrower, it just takes out Munchlax with a Poison Jab. And the turn right after, I can finish up the fight with a close combat. All things considered, I didn't get overly targeted, and I still have my items intact, which is perfect. That said, I've made the best preparations that I can, but even still, Cyrus is a formidable opponent. The guy has a Gyarados and 2 flying types, which isn't the best for Infernape. You might also notice that I have 3 Pokemon on my team, which is just B-Barrel for the Rock Climb HM. If I would have taught Rock Climb to Infernape, I would have had to unlearn Grass Knot, which I have no way of recovering afterwards. So because it's allowed to have HM Pokemon, it can hang in the background, but if it ever hits the battlefield, I have to reset the run. I begin the fight by going for a Stomp against Honchkrow, which doesn't quite do half, and it then hits me with a Steel Wing. I'm not quite sure why it went for Steel Wing instead of Drill Peck, but it does get the defense boost. A Flamethrower is enough to knock out Honchkrow at this range, but for some reason, Cyrus goes for a Super Potion. Not a full restore, a Super Potion. Why? My Flamethrower then connects, taking Honchkrow below half, and Cyrus decides he wants to keep his Honchkrow around, swapping it out for Gyarados. I was expecting to deal with Gyarados after Honchkrow anyway, since the thing has Earthquake. For that exact reason, I've put some defense EVs into Rapidash to try and hopefully survive said Earthquake. My Flamethrower on the Switch, however, deals pathetic damage. I then know I can't one-hit KO this thing, so I go for a Stomp, which actually doesn't do too bad, and manages to get a flinch. I then reveal my secret weapon, Natural Gift, which changes type based on what berry you're holding. So by holding a Wepper Berry, we can turn Natural Gift into a quad-effective electric type move, taking out the Gyarados. Cyrus then sends back his Honchkrow he was trying to save, but since it's at such low health, we can just outspeed and knock it out with a Flamethrower. Third is his Weavile, and because we're almost full health and this thing doesn't have any super effective moves against Rapidash, I decide to just stay in and tank the Brick Break. I connect with a Megahorn, which won't KO the Weavile because of the Intimidate. However, I end up getting a critical hit, taking the Weavile out in one shot. It wouldn't be able to take me out with a non-crit move anyway, but I probably should have just gone for 2 Flamethrowers for guaranteed accuracy. Finally, Cyrus has Crobat, which also doesn't have any moves that can non-crit one-shot us, so I decide to go for a Stomp to try and fish for a flinch, which I don't end up getting as the Crobat hits me with Confuse Ray. This, however, is absolutely perfect since we don't want Crobat confusing us as we swap out into Zuko. It's not too likely to go for Air Slash since it's not super effective against Rapidash, and it's less powerful than its physical moves. So after tanking a bite on the Switch, Zuko can fire off a Wepper Berry electric-type Natural Gift the next turn, which leaves a bit to be desired in the damage department. Luckily, Crobat goes for a Cross Poison instead of Confuse Ray, which would just make this a total gamble. Cyrus then reveals he had a full restore all along, healing up his Crobat as I hit it with a Flamethrower. I even managed to get a burn, which seems to be the theme this run, as another Flamethrower is then enough to take out the Crobat, beating the fight against Cyrus. And with Team Galactic defeated, we finally get to head east towards Sunny Shore City. Here we meet the depressed gym leader Volkner, who just wants to be beaten in a Pokemon battle. I can arrange that. Told ya. Get wrecked, scrub. With all 8 badges collected, we have yet more trainers to dodge. And once we make our way through Victory Road, there's really only 2 challenges remaining. Well, okay, really only 1. Because while we do have to take on Barry, his Pokemon are so much lower than the level cap that it's a breeze. So we've got to get prepared for the Elite Four. And while Zuko's going in with Earthquake, Rock Slide, Flamethrower, and Grass Knot, some of his moves, much like his item, will have to be swapped out between Elite Four fights, which won't be quite as necessary for Iroh Pyro coming in with Flare Blitz, Mega Horn, Bounce, and Stomp. It's no understatement that we're at a massive disadvantage going into the Elite Four. The only thing we actually have going for us is that unlike the newer games where all the Elite Four members are the same level, the early ones are a lot lower than the later ones. So going up against Aaron's Dustox, due to the level cap, we're 10 levels above it, meaning we can very easily just knock it out with a flamethrower. In comes Beautifly, which is where we're going to use our Wide Lens Rock Slide to deal quad effective damage and guarantee the KO. You know how I said earlier I was going to check for mistakes and not make any from now on? Well, I totally misclick, going for Grass Knot instead of Earthquake since I reordered the moves before the team preview. It ends up being fine since there's nothing that this Trapeon can actually do to hurt me, so I get to finish it off with an Earthquake the next turn instead, but it's still frustrating. Also, I did get as close to level 64 as possible before this fight so that I'd level up and get as much advantage as I can through the Elite Four. After all, the way the Elite Four level cap works is we get to enter the Elite Four at the level of the highest level Pokemon of the final Elite Four member, being Lucian. In other news, Heracross got one-shot by a flamethrower. Aaron's last Pokemon is a Vespiquen, which also gets destroyed by a quad effective Rock Slide. And while we're pretty much guaranteed to defeat a Bug-type Elite Four with our Fire types, we fare a lot worse against Bertha's Ground types. And Bertha is in fact the entire reason that I kept Grass Knot around all this time, which much like versus Wake is enough to take out Quagsire in one hit right off the bat. Whiscash on the other hand isn't as heavy and we can't one-shot it with a Grass Knot, but we don't really have another choice. We do also pretty comfortably survive any non-crit move that this thing throws at us. So outside of the 1 in 16 chance that we instantly lose the game, we're not too endangered. It ends up going for the super effective Zen Headbutt, which despite not being stabbed, does almost half to us, probably because of our defense lowering nature. This lets us use another Grass Knot the next turn to finish off the Whiscash. Bertha's third Pokemon is a Powdon, and because this bad boy weighs 300 kilograms, Grass Knot is easily a one-shot. Which also goes for Golem. The thing is just a pile of rocks quad weak to grass. Of course it gets one shot. Finally, we face Pseudo-Wudo, and for this exact reason, I've given Zuko a Shuckaberry, which means if we're hit with an Earthquake, the Shuckaberry will reduce the damage and will survive. In hindsight, I probably didn't need Rock Slide to beat Aaron, and I could have kept close combat just for this Pseudo-Wudo. It doesn't decide to go for Earthquake, however, hitting me with a Hammer Arm and reducing its own speed. Bertha then of course uses a Full Restore as I hit it back into the yellow with another Earthquake. And as the Sandstorm rages, I'm left with just 10 HP remaining. But Bertha doesn't use another Full Restore, which means that once we knock out the Pseudo-Wudo, we don't actually have to take the end of turn damage from Sandstorm because we finish the fight. With Bertha defeated, Flint challenges us to an Agni-Kai, a fire-on-fire duel. Well, sort of. Despite being a Fire-type expert of the Elite Four, he also only has 2 Fire types, because there are only 2 in the game. He starts out with one of them, sending in Rapidash that we can immediately take out with a super effective Earthquake. From there, he sends in Lopunny, which I have no idea what it has to do with Fire types, however, it would have been useful to have close combat once again. I instead go for the lesser replacement Rock Slide to potentially try and fish for a flinch, which doesn't even do half damage, but I do get said flinch. I then go for an Earthquake, hoping it'll be enough damage together with the Rock Slide to take the Lopunny out, however, it survives in the red, then using Charm to lower my attack, and since there's a Full Restore coming, I'm forced to swap out. Much like with Rock Slide, I step on the Disgusting Bunny to try and fish for a flinch, and in fact get it. I then use my most powerful Fire-type moves reserved for the most foul of creatures to take out Lopunny's remaining health. Third, Flint decides to send in Steelix, and because it poses no threat at all really to Zuko, I decide to swap him in as the Steelix goes for Sunny Day, powering up my Fire-type moves. As a consequence, it's incredibly easy to one-shot it with a double power flamethrower that would have one-shot it anyway. Finally, Flint sends in his own Infernape, which also has Earthquake, which is the exact reason why I still have the Shuckaberry to reduce that super effective damage. However, because of my hasty nature and speed EVs, I'm faster and just barely miss out on the KO, activating Infernape's Citrus Berry. And instead of hitting me with a super effective Earthquake, it hits me with a Sun-boosted Flare Blitz, which ends up doing a ton of damage, luckily not getting a critical hit. It also very much works in my favor since Infernape takes itself out with the recoil damage, leaving only Flint's Driftblim. And with the Sun so helpfully set up for me, I take it out with a single flamethrower, beating the third Elite Four member. The final member of the Elite Four, Lucian, has a team full of psychic types, which is a terrible matchup for a fighting type Infernape. So to be able to tank at least one hit from this Mr. Mime, I've equipped Infernape with a Pitaya Berry to reduce the damage from super effective psychic type moves. This way, since I know I can survive any non-crit, I can safely set up a Swords Dance to boost my attack to +2, but the Mr. Mime just goes for a light screen, not even reflect. So I use one of Fantina's tricks to greater effect and take out the Mr. Mime in one shot. Next is Alakazam, but it too is a frail psychic type that's slower than Infernape, so it gets destroyed by a Shadow Claw. Third is Girafarig, and while I love this Pokemon, why does a member of the Elite Four have this one, much less the fourth member? Fourth is Bronzong, and because of its Levitate ability, I can't hit it with Earthquake, so I go for +2 Shadow Claw, but I probably should have just gone for Flamethrower since it didn't even do half. It then hits me with a Psychic that gets weakened by my Payapa Berry, allowing me to survive even a critical hit. Because the light screen wore off, I probably could have just taken it out with a Flamethrower here, but instead I swap out into Iroh, who tanks a Psychic, and then takes out the Bronzong with a Flare Blitz the following turn. This leaves only Medicham, and I'm in no position to swap out back into Infernape, so I decide to go for Bounce. The Medicham then misses an Ice Punch, and the Bounce connects, taking out the Medicham in one critical hit. The critical hit wasn't necessary since Iroh has max attack EVs. And so with the Elite Four defeated, I find myself in front of the champion in a challenge I figured I'd try and probably lose painfully many times during the way for the memes. But since I've made it this far, let's give it a shot. Cynthia is probably the most difficult champion in all of Pokemon, and that is further exacerbated when you only bring 2. Not only does she have a Milotic, we're also weak to her signature Garchomp. Regardless, I'm gonna try my very best, starting out with a Mega Horn, doing over half to the Spiritomb. I'm then very grateful it hits me with a Dark Pulse and not something like Hypnosis or Embargo. I then actually connect with my second Mega Horn, finishing off the Spiritomb. Second out is Cynthia's Gastrodon, and if we would have been hit by Embargo, it would have been a lot more difficult to deal with this thing, since we can now just go for a Grass-type Natural Gift, taking it out in one quad-effective shot. It also means we've used up our Pineapple Berry, so we can't hit the Milotic for a Grass-type Natural Gift, so I opt for Mega Horn instead. This way I can get as much damage as possible before it takes me out with Surf. However, the Milotic ends up setting up an Aqua Ring. I know I can't take out Milotic with another Mega Horn, so I might as well try for a Bounce and try to get the Paralyze. I dodge a Surf that would have taken me out while I'm in the air, and a Bounce does a fair amount of damage, getting it in range of a Mega Horn as it just whiffs going for a Mirror Coat. So as I then connect again with another Mega Horn, it's actually enough damage to take out the Milotic. I didn't even think we'd get past this thing, but here we are. All good things come to an end at some point, however, as Cynthia sends in her Garchomp. 2 Earthquakes from this thing, and I am dead in the water, or fire. So I decide to go for Bounce as it misses a Brick Break, and once my Bounce connects, I fish for a Paralysis, which I unfortunately don't end up getting. However, Garchomp also misses a Dragon Rush, giving me an extra turn, so I miss a Mega Horn of my own. Then, for whatever reason, it once again tries to hit me with Brick Break, which isn't even enough to take me out. So I try for another Mega Horn, missing once again, but Garchomp misses another Dragon Rush. At this point, Garchomp is just toying with me, and even though I connect with the next Mega Horn, it's of course not enough to take the Garchomp out. Not even close, just tickling it a bit before activating its Citrus Berry, and it gets back to pretty much exactly the same health, which is when Garchomp decides it's done playing around, hitting Iroh with an Earthquake, taking out his final 39 health. And so falls the Dragon of the West, leaving us with our only other Pokemon, Infernape, who would of course be taken out by a single Earthquake from Garchomp, but with a held Yache Berry, we can fire off a quad-effective Ice-type Natural Gift, taking out Garchomp's remaining health. That one's for Uncle Iroh, you scum. This leaves Cynthia with her final 2 Pokemon, the first of which being Roserade, which doesn't really have a great way to hurt us, so I decide to set up a Swords Dance to boost my attack to +2. Roserade then deals some pathetic damage with Energy Ball, only about 20% of my health, meaning I can outspeed the next turn and with a +2 Earthquake take out the Roserade in one hit, leaving Cynthia with as many Pokemon as I have, only Lucario. Which is when it dawned on me, I'm faster than Lucario. I'm gonna outspeed with a +2 Earthquake. I'm actually gonna beat a Pokemon Pearl Hardcore Nuzlocke using only fire types, which just goes to show exactly how much can be achieved with just a bit of help from Iroh when it's most necessary by Zuko alone. I actually thought going into this one that it would just be a sequence of failed attempts until I got as far as I could. So now you actually have to subscribe because I beat the challenge. Otherwise, I'm sending in Infernape.